The heavy doors of the briefing room slid open with a soft hiss. Every head turned toward the sound. What walked through those doors should have been impossible. Sergeant Hana Kim stepped into the room. Her black combat armor was cracked and burned. Smoke still rose from the damaged plates on her chest. Her left arm hung at an odd angle, clearly broken. Blood ran down her face from a deep cut above her eye. She moved like every step caused pain. But she was alive. Commander Vextar felt his scales tighten against his skin. His yellow eyes widened as he stared at the human woman. 3 weeks ago, he had watched her transport ship explode on the main screen. The entire battalion was gone, 200 human soldiers, including Sergeant Kim. The official report said no survivors. General Corvain's crystal body rang with a low, shocked tone. The sound filled the room like broken glass. Her blue light flickered rapidly, a sign of deep confusion among her people. She had personally signed the death certificates. Admiral Zenth's compound eyes focused and unfocused repeatedly. His insect-like head tilted left, then right. The gesture meant extreme surprise in Hivekin culture. His mandibles clicked together 3 times. In his species, this was the sound of disbelief. Hana Kim looked around the room at each alien officer. Her gray eyes were calm, too calm for someone who should be dead. She walked to the large metal table in the center of the room. Each step echoed in the silence. The human reached up and removed her helmet. The metal was dented and scorched. Long cracks ran across its surface. She set it down on the polished table with a dull thunk. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet room. She stood at attention, her back straight despite her injuries. Her voice was rough when she spoke, like she had been breathing smoke for days. "Reporting for debrief, sir." Commander Vextar blinked his yellow eyes several times. He looked at the other officers. They looked back at him. No one seemed to know what to say. "Sergeant Kim," Vextar finally managed. His forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air, a nervous habit. "Your transport was destroyed 3 weeks ago. We saw it happen." "Yes, sir." "There were no escape pods, no distress signals." "No, sir." "Then how are you here?" Hana Kim's expression did not change. "I completed the mission, sir." General Corvain's crystal form chimed louder. The sound was sharp and angry. "That is impossible." The Void Render command post was behind 50 miles of enemy territory. Even if you survived the crash, you could never have reached it alone. "But I did reach it, ma'am." Hana's voice stayed level. "The command post is destroyed. The Void Render fleet has pulled back from the Kepler system." Admiral Zenth leaned forward. His 6 legs clicked against the floor. "Human, you ask us to believe you survived a ship explosion, traveled 50 miles through enemy territory, destroyed a heavily guarded command post and escaped, all by yourself." "I had help for the first part, sir." "Help?" "Private Sung Ho and Corporal Yun Jae survived the crash with me. They died holding off a Void Render patrol so I could reach the target." The room fell silent again. Vextar studied the human's face. She showed no emotion when she spoke of her dead comrades, but he could see something in her eyes. Pain. Not from her physical wounds. Something deeper. "Show us your mission recorder," General Corvain demanded. Hana reached to her belt and pulled out a small black device. She placed it on the table next to her helmet. The recorder was cracked but still functional. Admiral Zenth activated the table's holographic display. Images filled the air above them. The first showed Hana's transport ship under attack. Void Render fighters swarmed around it like angry insects. Explosions lit up the screen. Then the ship broke apart. Pieces of metal and flame scattered in all directions. The recorder went black. When it came back on, Hana was crawling through twisted wreckage. 2 other humans were with her. Both were injured. They moved quickly but quietly through the debris field. "We need to reach the surface," Sung Ho whispered on the recording. "The emergency beacon is still active. They'll find us if we stay here." "No beacon," Hana said. "They're monitoring all frequencies. We go dark and complete the mission." "The mission?" Yun Jae sounded shocked. "Hana, the mission is over. We need to get rescued." There is no rescue. Look at the tactical display. The recording showed Hana pointing to a small screen on her wrist. Red dots filled the map. Hundreds of them. All void render forces. They control this entire system now. Hana continued. If we don't take out their command post, the fleet moves on to Earth colonies. Millions will die. The two other humans looked at each other. Then they nodded. The recording fast-forwarded through 3 days of careful movement. The humans avoided void render patrols. They hid in caves and ruins. They ate emergency rations and drank rainwater. On the 4th day, they reached the enemy command post. It was huge. A black tower that stretched up into the clouds. Thousands of void render soldiers guarded it. How do we get inside? Sung Ho asked. We don't, Hana replied. We bring it down. She pointed to the base of the tower. The foundation uses quantum stabilizers. If we overload them, the whole structure collapses. That's a suicide mission. Maybe, but it's the only way. The alien officers watched as the 3 humans made their plan. Sung Ho and Yoon Jae would create a distraction, draw the guards away from the tower base. Hana would plant the explosives. The plan worked perfectly. Too perfectly. Commander Vextar paused the recording. Sergeant, this attack pattern. How did you know it would succeed? I studied void render defensive strategies, sir. They always keep their heaviest forces on the perimeter. They expect attacks from outside, not from within their security zone. You studied them? Yes, sir. For 2 years before this deployment, General Corvain's light flickered faster. You spent 2 years studying the enemy? I studied 12 different hostile species, ma'am. Their tactics, their psychology, their weaknesses. I wrote papers on optimal human responses to each threat type. Admiral Zenth's mandibles clicked rapidly. You wrote papers? Academic research, sir. Most command officers called it a waste of time. The recording continued. It showed the final battle. Sung Ho and Yoon Jae fought bravely but were overwhelmed. They died buying Hana the time she needed. The tower collapsed in a spectacular explosion, but the recording didn't end there. It showed Hana's 3-week journey back to friendly territory. She traveled only at night. She avoided all enemy patrols. She stole food from void render supply depots. She treated her own injuries with salvaged medical supplies. When the recording finally ended, the room was completely silent. Commander Vextar looked at his fellow officers. Then he looked back at Hana Kim. Sergeant, in my 40 years of military service, I have never seen a human accomplish what you accomplished. Thank you, sir. That was not a compliment. His yellow eyes narrowed. Your survival rate defies all statistical probability. 3 major engagements in the past year. 3 miraculous escapes. General Corvain's crystal body rang with suspicion. The Battle of Titan Base, the defense of Station Echo, and now this. Every time you are the only survivor. Every time you achieve impossible victory. Admiral Zenth leaned back in his chair. Some would call that luck, Sergeant Kim. Hana's gray eyes hardened. She had heard this before. She straightened her shoulders despite the pain. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. Hana looked each alien officer in the eye. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. Call it luck. Again, I dare you. 6 months earlier, Titan Base hung in space like a broken toy. The massive station orbited Saturn's largest moon, its metal hull torn open in 3 places. Emergency lights blinked red through the holes. Atmosphere leaked out in frozen white streams. Inside the station, Corporal Hana Kim crouched behind an overturned table. Her breathing was steady despite the chaos around her. Laser fire lit up the corridor like deadly lightning. The smell of burned metal and ozone filled the air. They've got us surrounded, whispered Private J. Park. He pressed his back against the wall next to her. His hands shook as he reloaded his rifle. We're dead, Hana. We're all dead. Private Min-Ho Lee crawled over to them, staying low. Blood ran down his arm from a laser burn. The aliens broke through level 7. They'll be here in 5 minutes. 20 human Marines were trapped in the station's command center. Outside, 200 void render shock troops hunted them through the corridors. The aliens moved like shadows, their black armor blending with the darkness. Red eyes glowed behind their helmets. Captain Boram's voice crackled over the radio. "All units, this is command. We're abandoning the station. Get to the escape pods now." "Ma'am, this is Kim," Hana spoke into her comm unit. "The aliens control the pod bays. Anyone who tries to reach them will be killed." "Then find another way out, Corporal. That's an order." The radio went dead. Hana looked around at her squad. Fear filled their eyes. Some of the younger Marines were crying. They all expected to die, but Hana Kim was thinking. She pulled out a small tablet and activated the station's layout map. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, tracing paths through the corridors. The other Marines watched her with confusion. "What are you doing?" J. Park asked. "Learning," Hana replied. She switched to another screen showing biological data on void render forces. "Look at this. Their homeworld has gravity 3 times stronger than Earth." "So what?" "So they evolved as pack hunters on a high-gravity world. Watch how they move." Hana activated the security cameras still working in the station. The screens showed groups of void render soldiers moving through the corridors. They moved in tight formations, always checking the ceiling and upper levels first. "They expect their prey to try to escape upward," Hana explained. "On their world, climbing higher means getting away from ground predators. It's instinct." Minho Lee wiped blood from his arm. "What does that help us?" "It means we go down, not up." The other Marines stared at her. Going down meant going deeper into the station, farther from the escape routes. It made no sense. "Hana, that's crazy," J. Park said. "The lower levels are flooding. The life support is failing down there." "Exactly. The aliens won't expect us to go where we can't survive." Hana stood up and shouldered her rifle. "Trust me." She led the squad to a maintenance hatch in the floor. The metal cover was heavy, but 4 Marines managed to lift it. Below was a narrow tunnel filled with pipes and cables. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. "Single file," Hana ordered. "Stay quiet, move slow." One by one, the Marines dropped into the tunnel. Hana went last, sealing the hatch behind them. Above, they could hear the void render soldiers searching the command center. Alien voices spoke in harsh, clicking sounds. The tunnel was cramped and cold. Water dripped from broken pipes. Some sections were flooded knee-deep. The Marines struggled through the dark passages following Hana's lead. "Where are we going?" whispered Sergeant Jinho. He was the oldest Marine in the group, with gray hair and worried eyes. "The reactor core," Hana replied. "It's the one place on the station they won't search. Because it's radioactive death trap. Because they're afraid of radiation. Their species evolved on a world with no natural radioactivity. Even small amounts make them sick." They moved through the lower levels for 2 hours. The radiation counters on their suits clicked faster as they got closer to the reactor. But Hana knew the human tolerance levels. They could survive the exposure for a short time. Finally, they reached the reactor chamber. It was a huge room filled with glowing blue energy conduits. The air hummed with power. Warning signs covered every wall in 12 different languages. "Now, what?" Jinho asked. "Now we wait," Hana said. She found a control terminal and began typing commands. "The void render attack pattern is predictable. They'll sweep the station from top to bottom, then move to secure the valuable equipment." "How do you know that?" "I read their tactical manuals. Captured documents from the Battle of Proxima. They always follow the same sequence." The other Marines looked at each other in amazement. Most soldiers never read enemy documents. They left. That to intelligence officers. Hana continued working at the terminal. "They'll spend 3 hours looting the upper levels. Then they'll set demolition charges and leave. We just have to survive until then." "What if they find us?" "They won't. The radiation will keep them away." She was right. For 3 hours, the Marines hid in the reactor chamber while the void render forces ransacked the station above them. They could hear explosions and the sound of metal being torn apart. But no aliens came near the reactor. When the sounds finally stopped, Hana checked the sensors. They're gone, the station is clear. How can you be sure? Because I've been monitoring their communications. She held up a small device that looked like a standard radio, modified to pick up their frequency. They reported mission complete 20 minutes ago. The Marines stared at her. You speak their language? I learned it, along with their customs, their tactics, and their psychology. Hana packed away the U device. Knowledge is the best weapon we have. They made their way back through the station carefully. The Void Render forces had indeed left, but they had taken everything valuable and planted explosives throughout the structure. The station would be destroyed in 6 hours. The Marines reached the docking bay, where a small supply ship waited. It was damaged but still functional. As they prepared for takeoff, J. Park turned to Hana. How did you know all that would work? Because I study our enemies. I learn their strengths and weaknesses. Most importantly, I learn their mistakes. What mistakes? They assume humans are just another primitive species. They think we're ruled by panic and emotion. They never expect us to outthink them. The ship lifted off from Titan Base just as the first explosions began. The station broke apart in a chain of brilliant flashes, but all 20 Marines escaped alive. 3 days later, Hana sat in a debriefing room at Fleet Command. Admiral Chen Wu, a middle-aged human with sharp eyes, read her report with interest. Corporal Kim, this is remarkable work. Your analysis of Void Render psychology probably saved hundreds of lives. Thank you, sir. However, my alien colleagues are less impressed. The Admiral frowned. Commander Vextar called your survival statistically impossible. General Corvain believes it was pure luck. Luck, sir? They can't understand how 20 humans held off 200 Void Render shock troops. The numbers don't make sense to them. Hana felt frustration rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. Perhaps they should study human tactical doctrine, sir. Perhaps they should. The Admiral leaned back in his chair. But they won't. They've classified this entire incident as tactical luck. That's going in your file. I understand, sir. Do you? Because this pattern is starting to concern some people. 3 impossible victories in 6 months. Some officers think you're either the luckiest soldier alive or something else entirely. Hana met his gaze steadily. What else would I be, sir? I don't know, Corporal. But I have a feeling we're going to find out. The Admiral dismissed her, but his words followed Hana out of the room. She had saved her squad by thinking like the enemy. She had studied their behavior and used their instincts against them. But instead of praise, she received suspicion. Instead of recognition, she got labeled as lucky. It wouldn't be the last time. As she walked through the corridors of Fleet Command, other soldiers watched her pass. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered behind her back. The human who survived. Impossible odds. The Marine who never lost a battle. But Hana knew the truth. She didn't win because she was lucky. She won because she was prepared. While other soldiers practiced shooting and fighting, she studied languages and psychology. While they learned to follow orders, she learned to think like her enemies. The alien officers would never understand that. To them, humans were supposed to be simple creatures driven by emotion and instinct. The idea that a human could outthink them was impossible. So they called it luck, and that was their greatest mistake. 4 months before her impossible return, Station Echo drifted silently in the darkness of space. The massive research facility hung between 2 dead planets, its lights flickering like dying stars. Inside, alarms screamed through empty corridors. Captain, Sujin ran through the station's command center, shouting orders to her crew. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, but loose strands stuck to her sweating face. Red warning lights flashed on every screen around her. "Evacuation status report," she called out. Lieutenant Dong Wu looked up from his communication station. His young face was pale with fear. 80% of civilian personnel are loaded on transport ships, but we're running out of time, Captain. Through the massive windows of the command center, they could see the enemy approaching. 3 void-rendered dreadnoughts moved toward Station Echo like black daggers cutting through space. Each ship was twice the size of the station. Their weapons glowed, with deadly energy. "How long until they reach weapons range?" Captain Su Jin asked. 12 minutes, replied Ensign Kai Young from the sensor station. "Their plasma cannons will tear us apart in one volley." Captain Su Jin clenched her fists. Station Echo held 3,000 researchers and their families. The evacuation was taking too long. Too many people would die if the station was destroyed before the transports could escape. "Captain," a voice called from across the room. "Sergeant Kim requests permission to speak with you." Su Jin turned to see Hana Kim walking toward her. The sergeant's expression was calm despite the chaos around them. She carried a large duffel bag over her shoulder and wore full combat armor. "Sergeant, you should be on the evacuation transport with the other Marines. I have a different plan." "Ma'am." Hana set her bag down on the command table. "I need 30 minutes to prepare a defensive action." "Defensive action?" Captain Su Jin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sergeant, we have no weapons that can stop those dreadnoughts. Our defensive systems are designed to handle pirates, not a full battle fleet. I don't plan to fight them directly." "Then what do you plan to do?" Hana opened her duffel bag and pulled out a collection of electronic components. Circuit boards, power cells, and lengths of cable spilled across the table. To most people, it looked like spare parts and junk. "I'm going to make them fight each other." The command crew stared at her like she had gone insane. Lieutenant Dong, Wu spoke first. "Sergeant, the Void Render ships are controlled by a collective consciousness. They share the same mind. They can't fight each other." "That's exactly why this will work." Hana began connecting the components together with quick, practiced movements. "A hive mind is efficient, but it has weaknesses. If you disrupt the connection between individual units, they become confused and vulnerable." Captain Su Jin watched as Hana assembled what looked like a crude electromagnetic pulse device. "You're talking about jamming their communications. That's been tried before. It doesn't work." "Not jamming, scrambling." Hana held up a small crystal chip. "This is a void render neural interface component. I recovered it from a crashed fighter 6 months ago. I've been studying it since then." "Studying it how?" "I mapped its frequency patterns and signal protocols. I know how their collective consciousness works now. More importantly, I know how to break it." Ensign Kai Young looked up from his sensors. "Captain, the enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 8 minutes. Sergeant Kim, even if your device works, how do you plan to get close enough to use it?" Hana pointed to the maintenance shaft that led to the station's outer hull. "The enemy won't expect an attack from inside the station. I can use the maintenance tunnels to reach an external communications array. From there, I can transmit the scrambling signal directly to their ships." "That's suicide. The outer hull has no atmosphere, no protection from their weapons. It's the only way to save the civilians." Hana finished assembling her device and strapped it to her chest. "The evacuation transports need 20 more minutes to reach safe distance. I can give them that time." Captain Su Jin looked around at her crew. They all knew the mathematics of the situation. 3,000 lives against 1. It wasn't even a difficult choice. "Do it," she said quietly. Hana nodded and headed for the maintenance shaft. As she reached the opening, Captain Su Jin called after her. "Sergeant, what are the chances this actually works?" "Honestly, about 60%. Hana pulled on her helmet and sealed her suit. "But 60% is better than 0. She disappeared into the shaft, leaving the command crew to watch the enemy approach. Lieutenant Dong Wu activated the external cameras and tracked Hana's progress as she moved through the station's outer structure. "There," he said, pointing to a screen. "She's reached Communications Array 7. On the display, they could see Hana working in the vacuum of space. Her movements were careful and precise despite the bulky spacesuit. She connected her device to the array's transmission equipment and began entering commands on a small keypad. 6 minutes until the enemy reaches weapons range, Ensign Kai Young reported. "Come on, Hana," Captain Su Jin whispered. The void-rendered dreadnoughts continued their approach. Their black hulls absorbed light like hungry shadows. Energy built up in their weapon systems, preparing to destroy the station. Then something strange happened. The lead dreadnought suddenly veered to the left. Its movements became erratic, almost drunken. Warning lights began flashing on its hull. "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Dongwu asked. The second dreadnought opened fire, but not at the station. Its plasma beam struck the lead ship, causing massive explosions along its hull. The third ship responded by firing at both of its companions. "It's working," Captain Su-jin breathed. "They're attacking each other." On the communication channel, they could hear alien voices speaking in panic. The void render language was harsh and clicking, but the fear in their tones was universal. Lieutenant Dongwu, who had studied enemy communications, translated roughly. "They're saying something about losing contact with the collective. Individual. Ship commanders are taking independent action." "Independent action," Captain Su-jin repeated. "For a species that shares one mind, that must be terrifying." The battle between the three dreadnoughts intensified. Ships that had worked together perfectly minutes before now fought like wild animals. Their coordination was gone. Their shared, tactical knowledge meant nothing when they couldn't communicate. One dreadnought exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The other two continued firing at each other, their hulls cracking under the assault. "This is incredible," Ensign Kai Young said. "How did Sergeant Kim know this would happen?" Captain Su-jin didn't answer. She was watching the external cameras, looking for any sign of Hana. The communications array where she had been working was now damaged by debris from the battle. "Dongwu, do you have contact with Sergeant Kim?" "Negative, Captain." No response. On any frequency. The remaining two void render ships were badly damaged. One began limping away from the battle, its engines failing. The other ship's hull was breached in multiple places. It drifted powerless in space. "All evacuation transports have cleared the danger zone," reported Ki Young. "The civilians are safe." Captain Su-jin should have felt relief, but she couldn't. Stop thinking about Hana Kim. The sergeant had saved 3,000 lives, but at what cost? "Captain," Dongwu called out suddenly, "I'm picking up a weak signal from the outer hull." "From Sergeant Kim?" "It's hard to tell. The signal is very faint. Put it on speakers." Static filled the command center, broken by occasional words. The voice was barely recognizable, distorted by damage to the communication equipment. "This is Kim. Mission accomplished. Requesting pickup." The entire command crew cheered. Captain Su-jin felt tears of relief run down her face. It took 2 hours to reach Hana and bring her back inside the station. Her spacesuit was damaged by debris and she had nearly run out of air. But she was alive. As the medical team checked her injuries, Captain Su-jin sat beside her in the medical bay. "Sergeant, how did you know that would work?" "I studied their neural interface patterns for 6 months," Hana replied weakly. "I knew that disrupting the collective consciousness would cause confusion. I just didn't know it would cause them to attack each other." "You mean you weren't sure it would work?" "I was sure the scrambling signal would affect their coordination. The friendly fire was an unexpected bonus." Captain Su-jin shook her head in amazement. "The alien command is going to have trouble believing this report. Let me guess. They'll call it luck, probably." Hana closed her eyes and smiled slightly. "Let them. As long as the civilians are safe, I don't care what they call it." But Captain Su-jin cared. She had watched Hana Kim save 3,000 lives through careful planning and scientific knowledge. She had seen human intelligence triumph over superior, alien technology, yet she knew the alien officers would never accept that explanation. To them, humans were supposed to be primitive and emotional. The idea that a human could understand alien technology better than the aliens themselves was impossible. So, they would call it luck. Again. And that pattern of denial was becoming dangerous for everyone. The silence in the briefing room stretched like a taut wire. Hana Kim stood at attention, her battered helmet still resting on the polished table. The 3 alien officers sat frozen in their chairs, processing what they had just heard. "General," Corvain's crystalline form rang with a sound like breaking glass. Her blue light flickered rapidly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the harmonic tones of barely controlled anger. "Sergeant Kim, your latest mission was classified as impossible. We sent you because we expected failure." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Hana's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her hands behind her back. The admission was as clear as a confession. Commander Vexitar's yellow eyes narrowed to slits. His forked tongue flicked out repeatedly, tasting the tension in the room. The mission briefing specifically stated that the target was unreachable. The Void Render command post was protected by their entire reserve fleet. "Yes, sir," Hana replied. "Evenly. Yet you reached it. You destroyed it. You escaped." Vextar's scales darkened to deep purple, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. "All while completely cut off from support." "That is correct, sir." Admiral Zenth leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing on Hana with mechanical precision. His mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that suggested deep thought. When he spoke, his voice buzzed with electronic overtones. "The Hivekin Collective has analyzed your combat patterns across 17 different engagements. The statistical probability of your survival rate is so low that our computers initially reported it as a calculation error." Hana waited for him to continue. She had learned that alien officers preferred to make their points through long speeches rather than direct questions. "No human should survive what you have survived," Admiral Zenth continued. "The Battle of Titan, Base the defensive Station Echo, the raid on the Void Render supply depot at Kepler Station, the rescue mission at the Proxima colony. Every single operation should have resulted in your death." "But they didn't, sir." "No, they didn't." The Admiral's voice carried a note of suspicion that needed no translation. "Which raises questions about the nature of your victories." General Corvain's light pulsed brighter. "Sergeant, are you familiar with the concept of statistical impossibility?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you understand our concern. Your success rate defies the laws of probability. It suggests either extraordinary luck or something else entirely." The accusation was clear even without being spoken directly. They suspected her of being a traitor, a collaborator, someone who survived because she had made deals with the enemy. Commander Vextar stood up from his chair and began pacing around the table. His claws clicked against the metal floor with each step. "Tell me, Sergeant, how does a human with no special training consistently defeat enemies that have been conquering star systems for 3,000 years? "I study them, sir." "Study them how?" "I learn their languages, their customs, their military doctrine, their psychological profiles." Hana's voice remained calm and professional. "I analyze their strengths and weaknesses." "And where do you acquire this knowledge?" "From captured documents, intercepted communications, debriefings with prisoners, academic papers from the xenobiology department." Admiral Zenth's mandibles clicked faster. "You read academic papers?" "Yes, sir. Dr. Yoon Mi's research on Void Render social structures has been particularly useful. Professor Tae Sik's analysis of Nexari combat psychology helped me understand Commander Vextar's species' approach to warfare." Commander Vextar stopped pacing and stared at her. "You studied my species?" "Yes, sir. Nexari warriors prefer direct confrontation because your honor codes demand it. You view tactical withdrawal as cowardice, which makes your forces predictable in certain situations." The alien commander's scales turned almost black with anger. "You dare to analyze us like laboratory specimens?" "I analyze everyone I might have to fight alongside or against, sir. That includes human forces as well as alien ones." General Corvain's harmonic voice became sharp and discordant. "This is precisely what concerns us, Sergeant. Your approach to warfare is too calculating, too detached. It suggests a mind that views conflict as an intellectual exercise rather than a matter of life and death. With respect, ma'am, I view conflict as exactly what it is, a problem to be solved through the application of knowledge and logic. Human soldiers are supposed to fight with emotion, with passion, with instinct." Admiral Zenth's electronic buzz grew louder. "Your methods are too similar to how we would approach combat. Is that a problem, sir? It raises questions about your loyalty. The accusation finally came out into the open. Hana felt a cold anger building in her chest, but she kept her voice level and respectful. Are you questioning my loyalty to humanity, sir? We are questioning how a primitive species could produce a warrior capable of consistently defeating advanced alien forces, General Corvain replied. The logical explanation is that you are receiving assistance from someone with superior knowledge. Someone like the enemy? It would not be the first time a human has been compromised by alien influence. Hana took a deep breath and looked each officer in the eye. Permission to speak freely, sir? Commander Vextar resumed his seat. Granted. You want to know how I win battles against superior forces? I do my homework. While most soldiers spend their free time drinking and playing games, I study enemy tactics. While they complain about difficult assignments, I research the psychology of the species we're fighting. She gestured to the helmet on the table. When I was sent on this suicide mission, I already knew the layout of the target facility. I knew the guard rotation schedules. I knew which approach routes would be least defended. I knew all of this because I spent 2 years preparing for exactly this type of operation. Preparation cannot account for your survival rate. Admiral Zenth protested. It can, if you understand what you're preparing for. Hana's voice hardened, slightly. You sent me to destroy that command post because you thought it was impossible. You didn't expect me to come back, you wanted me to fail. We wanted to test your capabilities under extreme conditions. You wanted to get rid of a human who made you uncomfortable. Hana stepped closer to the table. My success rate embarrasses you. It challenges your assumptions about human capabilities. So instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, humans are smarter than you think, you accuse me of treason. The 3 alien officers exchanged glances. None of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, General Corvain broke the silence. Sergeant Kim, even if we accept your explanation about preparation and study, the fact remains that your achievements are statistically impossible. Only if you assume that human intelligence is inferior to alien intelligence. That is the scientific consensus among all member species of the Galactic Defense Alliance. Then your scientific consensus is wrong. The bluntness of her statement shocked all 3 officers. In their cultures, directly contradicting a superior's statement was considered extremely rude, possibly even treasonous. But Hana continued before they could respond. You've spent so much time thinking of humans as primitive that you've forgotten we're the species that went from ground-based agriculture to interstellar travel in less than 10,000 years. We're the species that adapted to alien technology in decades rather than centuries. We're the species that learns your languages faster than you learn ours. She picked up her helmet and held it in front of her. This helmet contains recording equipment that documented my entire mission. Every step I took, every decision I made, every lucky break that kept me alive. Would you like to know what the real pattern is? Tell us, Commander Vextar said quietly. The pattern is that I think like my enemies think. I anticipate their moves because I understand their psychology. I survive impossible odds because I turn their own strengths against them. Hana's gray eyes blazed with controlled fury. I don't win because I'm lucky. I win because I'm smart enough to make my own luck. The room fell silent again. The 3 alien officers sat motionless, processing. Her words, Admiral Zenth was the first to speak. If what you say is true, then human military doctrine should be revised to incorporate your methods. Human military doctrine doesn't need to be revised. It needs to be taken seriously. Hana replaced her helmet on the table. Every human soldier has the capacity to do what I do. They just need to be encouraged to think instead of just follow orders. General Corvain's light flickered uncertainly. You are suggesting that humans as a species are more intellectually capable than our assessments indicate. I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as fact. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It carried a weight of realization rather than suspicion. The alien officers were beginning to understand that their fundamental assumptions about humanity might be completely wrong. Commander Vextar spoke slowly and carefully. Sergeant Kim, if your abilities are representative of human potential rather than an anomaly, then the implications for our military alliance are significant. They are indeed, sir. It would mean that we have been wasting human resources by treating your species as expendable shock troops. It would mean that, yes, Admiral. Xanth's mandibles clicked in what Hana recognized as the Hivekin equivalent of nervous laughter. The interrogation continued for 3 more hours. The alien officers asked the same questions in different ways, trying to find inconsistencies in Hana's story. They wanted to believe she was lying. The alternative was too disturbing for their worldview. General Corvain activated a holographic display above the table. Files and documents appeared in the air, floating like digital ghosts. Sergeant Kim, we have been reviewing your personnel records. Yes, ma'am. You were born in Sol Earth 32 years ago. Your father was Colonel Han-Sik Kim, a decorated veteran of the first alien contact wars. Your mother was Dr. Soo-Jin Kim, a xenobiology professor at Seoul National University. That is correct. Your academic records show degrees in xenobiology, military history, and applied psychology. You speak 17 different languages, including 12 alien dialects. General Corvain's light pulsed with confusion. Why did you enlist as a basic infantry soldier instead of joining the intelligence corps? I wanted to serve on the front lines, ma'am. But your qualifications would have made you valuable in analysis work. Analysis work doesn't save lives. Directly. Combat does. Admiral Xanth leaned forward. Your personnel file also contains several research papers you published during your military service. Psychological warfare applications against hive mind species. Tactical advantages of cultural intelligence in multi-species operations. Predictive behavioral modeling for void render combat units. I wrote those papers during off-duty hours. Sir, most soldiers use their off-duty hours for recreation. I found the research more interesting than recreation. Commander Vextar's scales shifted to a lighter purple, indicating thoughtful consideration rather than anger. Sergeant, these papers demonstrate a level of academic rigor typically found only among career scholars. Yet you chose to remain in combat roles. Knowledge without application is just trivia, sir. The 3 officers exchanged meaningful looks. They were beginning to understand something that made them deeply uncomfortable. General Corvain dismissed the holographic files and activated the room's communication system. Colonel Yu-jin, please join us in briefing room 7. Within minutes, the door opened to admit a human officer. Colonel Yu-jin was a compact woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore the dress uniform of the Human Expeditionary Forces, with ribbons indicating service in a dozen different campaigns. Colonel, thank you for joining us, General Corvain said. We have some questions about Sergeant Kim's service record. Colonel, Yu-jin glanced at Hana with an expression that might have been sympathy or pride. It was hard to tell. What would you like to know? Is Sergeant Kim's performance typical for human soldiers? Define typical. Admiral Xanth's mandibles clicked impatiently. Does she represent average human military capability, or is she an exceptional case? That depends on what you mean by exceptional. Colonel Yu-jin took a seat across from the alien. Officers. Hana's academic qualifications are above average but not unprecedented. Her tactical success rate is higher than most, but several other human soldiers have achieved similar results. Similar results? Commander Vexitar's tongue flicked out nervously. Other humans have survived statistically impossible combat situations. Commander, with respect, what you call statistically impossible, we call Tuesday. The alien officers stared at her in shock. General Corvain's harmonic voice rose to a higher pitch. Colonel, are you saying that multiple human soldiers regularly achieve impossible victories? I'm saying that your calculations of what's possible might be based on incomplete data. Admiral Xanth activated his own holographic display. Statistics and graphs filled the air between them. Colonel, according to our analysis, human forces have achieved tactical success rates of 47% against superior alien forces. This defies every combat model we have developed. Perhaps your combat models don't account for human adaptability. Adaptability cannot explain these numbers. Colonel Yu-jin smiled coldly. can't it? Let me ask you something, Admiral. How many alien species have successfully integrated captured human technology into their own systems? That is not relevant to this discussion. Answer the question. Admiral Zenth's compound eyes focused and refocused several times. Very few species have successfully adapted human technology. How few? None that we are aware of. Interesting. Now let me ask another question. How many human engineers have successfully integrated alien technology into human systems? The alien officers remained silent. The answer is thousands, Colonel. Eugen continued. Human engineers routinely take alien technology and improve it. Human scientists study alien biology and develop better medical treatments for our alien allies. Human linguists learn new alien languages faster than native speakers learn human languages. She stood up and walked to the holographic display. You want to know why human soldiers achieve impossible victory rates? It's because humans are the most adaptable species in known space. We don't just learn from our mistakes. We learn from everyone else's mistakes too. General Corvain's light flickered rapidly. Colonel, are you claiming that humans are intellectually superior to other galactic species? I'm claiming that humans are intellectually different. We think in ways that other species find unpredictable because our brains evolved to handle chaos and change. Explain. Colonel Eugen gestured to Hana. Take Sergeant Kim as an example. She doesn't just study enemy tactics. She studies enemy psychology, biology, culture, and history. She builds comprehensive behavioral models that let her predict how different species will react in specific situations. That level of analysis should require massive computational resources. It does. We call those computational resources the human brain. Commander Vextar's scales had turned almost white, indicating extreme confusion. Colonel, you are suggesting that individual humans can perform analysis that requires supercomputers for other species. I'm not suggesting it, I'm stating it as fact. Colonel Eugen returned to her seat. Humans have been doing complex pattern analysis since before we discovered fire. We used to call it hunting, farming, and warfare. Now we call it military intelligence. Admiral Zenth's mandibles clicked in rapid sequence. If this is true, then our entire assessment of human capabilities has been fundamentally flawed. Yes, it has. It would mean that humans represent a far greater military asset than we calculated. Yes, we do. It would also mean that treating humans as expendable infantry has been a massive waste of resources. Now you're catching on. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The three alien officers had based their military strategies on the assumption that humans were brave, but simple creatures. Useful as shock troops, but not much else. If Colonel Eugen was right, then humans weren't just another member species of the Galactic Defense Alliance. They were potentially the most dangerous military force in known space. General Corvain's harmonic voice was barely above a whisper. Colonel, if human soldiers can consistently outthink alien enemies, why have you not shared this capability with the Alliance leadership? We tried to. For 5 years, human officers submitted reports documenting our analytical capabilities. The reports were filed away and ignored. Why were they ignored? Because accepting them would have meant admitting that your assumptions about primitive human intelligence were wrong. Commander Vextar stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Colonel, are you accusing the Alliance leadership of prejudice against humanity? I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply stating that humans have been consistently underestimated by their alien allies. And now? Colonel Eugen looked at each alien officer in turn. Now you have a choice. You can continue to treat humans as expendable soldiers and waste our potential, or you can start taking us seriously as intellectual equals and benefit from our capabilities. She gestured toward Hana again. Sergeant Kim didn't survive impossible missions through luck. She survived because she's smarter than her enemies expected. She won because she understood them better than they understood her. Admiral Zenth's electronic voice buzzed with what might have been admiration. Colonel, if human soldiers can consistently achieve this level of tactical analysis, it would revolutionize our military doctrine. It would revolutionize more than that, Admiral. What do you mean? Think about it. If humans can outthink the Void Render Collective, what does that say about our species' potential contributions to science, engineering, and diplomacy? The three alien officers looked at each other with expressions of dawning realization. They had spent decades thinking of humans as useful but limited allies. But if Colonel Yu Jin was right, then humans weren't just allies. They were the secret weapon that could win the war. General Corvain's light pulsed slowly as she processed this information. Colonel, this conversation has been highly enlightening. We will need time to discuss these revelations with the Alliance leadership. Of course, General. In the meantime, we have one more question for Sergeant Kim. All eyes turned back to Hana, who had remained silent throughout the exchange between her colonel and the alien officers. Sergeant, General Corvain continued, given what we now understand about human capabilities, we would like your assessment of the current military situation. Ma'am? Hana's smile was not the expression of someone who felt grateful for finally being taken seriously. It was the smile of a predator who had been underestimated for far too long. She stood up slowly, her gray eyes moving from one alien officer to another. When she spoke, her voice carried a quiet confidence that filled the room. You want to know what I need to guarantee victory against the Void Render forces? Yes, General Corvain replied, her crystalline form ringing with anticipation. First, I need access to your complete tactical databases. Every recorded engagement with Void Render forces for the past 50 years. Every intercepted communication. Every captured document. Admiral Zenth's compound eyes focused sharply. That information is classified at the highest levels. Then declassify it. You can't ask me to outthink an enemy if you won't let me study them properly. Commander Vextar's scales rippled with uncertainty. What else do you need? I need operational control over human forces. Not just my own squad. All human military units assigned to this operation. That is highly irregular. You are a sergeant, not a general. Then promote me or find a general who understands alien psychology better than I do. Hana's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Your choice. Colonel Yu Jin leaned forward slightly. Sergeant Kim, perhaps you could explain your strategic thinking to our allies. Hana nodded and walked to the holographic display controls. With quick movements, she called up a three-dimensional map of the Helix Nebula. Red dots marked known Void Render positions. The enemy has made 3 critical mistakes, she began. First, they've concentrated their forces in a defensive formation around their primary command ship. This makes them powerful but inflexible. How is that a mistake? General Corvain asked. Because concentrated forces are predictable forces. They can only respond to threats in predetermined ways. Hana highlighted several areas on the map. Second, mistake. They've positioned their fleet in the nebula's center where the gas clouds will interfere with their long-range sensors. The same gas clouds will interfere with our sensors, Commander Vextar pointed out. Not if we use human navigation systems. Human pilots are trained to fly by instinct when sensors fail. Void Render pilots are trained to rely entirely on their collective guidance system. Admiral Zenth's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. And the third mistake? They assume we'll attack them the same way we always have. Head-on assault with maximum firepower. Hana's smile returned. They're prepared for that. They're not prepared for humans who think like they do. She manipulated the display to show attack vectors and timing sequences. The Void Render Collective. Consciousness is their greatest strength, but it's also their greatest weakness. They think and react as one unified mind, which makes them incredibly efficient, which makes them incredibly vulnerable to psychological warfare. The alien officers exchanged confused glances. General Corvain spoke first. Sergeant, you cannot conduct psychological warfare against a species that shares a collective consciousness. Individual psychological techniques are ineffective against a hive mind. You're thinking too small. Hana enlarged the display to show the entire Void Render fleet structure. I'm not talking about affecting individual minds, I'm talking about affecting the collective itself. How? By making it doubt itself. She pointed to communication nodes scattered throughout the enemy fleet. Every void render ship is connected to the collective through quantum communication links. These links carry not just orders and information, but also emotional states and psychological patterns. Admiral Zenth leaned forward. You plan to somehow transmit psychological warfare through their communication system? I plan to do more than that. I plan to make their greatest strength turn against them. Hana called up new data showing human research into void render psychology. For 3 years, human scientists have been studying captured void render neural interface technology. We've learned how their collective consciousness processes information and makes decisions. What did you discover? We discovered that the collective consciousness has something very similar to what humans call anxiety. Hana highlighted specific neural patterns on the display. When the collective encounters unexpected situations, it experiences what we might call doubt or confusion. The more unexpected the situation, the stronger this response becomes. Commander Vexitar's scales shifted to a darker color. You are suggesting that an entire species can experience psychological distress? I'm saying that a hive mind is still a mind, and minds can be broken. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. General Corvain's harmonic voice was barely audible. Sergeant, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we don't just defeat the Void Render fleet. I'm proposing that we make them defeat themselves. Hana manipulated the display to show a complex battle plan. Multiple small human forces would strike simultaneously at carefully chosen targets throughout the nebula. The attacks won't be designed to destroy enemy ships. They'll be designed to create maximum confusion and unpredictability. We hit them in ways they've never seen before. We use tactics that violate every principle of warfare they understand. That sounds like suicide. It sounds like Tuesday. Hana's voice carried the same cold confidence Colonel Yu Jin had displayed earlier. Human forces specialize in unconventional warfare. We've been doing it since before we left Earth. Admiral Zenth studied the battle plan with his compound eyes. These attack patterns make no strategic sense. They violate basic principles of military doctrine. Exactly. The Void Render Collective will try to analyze and predict our movements, but there won't be any logic to analyze. The more they try to understand our tactics, the more confused they'll become. And then? Then we hit them with the real attack. Hana highlighted a single large force on the edge of the battle area. While their collective consciousness is struggling to process dozens of incomprehensible human actions, a concentrated strike force attacks their primary command ship. General Corvain's light pulsed rapidly. The command ship controls the entire collective. If it's destroyed, the entire fleet loses coordination. Individual ships will revert to autonomous operation, but they won't know how to function independently. They'll be sitting targets. Commander Vexitar stood up and walked around the display, studying it from different angles. Sergeant Kim, this plan requires precise timing and flawless execution. One mistake and the entire operation fails. Then we don't make mistakes. Human error rates in complex operations are statistically significant. Human error rates in routine operations are statistically significant. This isn't routine. She turned to face all 3 alien officers directly. You've spent this entire conversation trying to understand how humans achieve impossible victory rates. Now you have your answer. We don't fight the way you expect us to fight. We don't think the way you expect us to think. We don't fail the way you expect us to fail. Admiral Zenth's electronic voice buzzed with what might have been admiration or fear. Sergeant, if your plan succeeds, it will represent the most significant tactical innovation in modern warfare. If it fails? If it fails, the Void Render fleet will reach Earth in 6 days. The core worlds will fall within 2 weeks. Hana picked up her battered helmet from the table and held it in her hands. The metal was scarred and dented from her impossible mission, but it had protected her through 3 weeks behind enemy lines. Admiral, General, Commander, she said quietly. For the past year, you've attributed my victories to luck. You've dismissed human tactical capabilities as statistical anomalies. You've treated our species as useful but limited allies. She looked each alien officer in the eye. Today, you asked me what I need to guarantee victory against the most dangerous enemy force in known space. I've told you, The question now is whether you're finally ready to trust human judgment. Commander Vextar's scales had returned to their normal color, indicating acceptance rather than suspicion. Sergeant Kim, if we approve your plan, what assurance can you give us that it will succeed? None. The blunt answer surprised them. General Corvain's harmonic voice rose slightly. None? War doesn't come with guarantees. Victory isn't achieved through certainty. It's achieved through preparation, adaptation, and the willingness to take calculated risks. She paused and smiled again. That same predatory expression that had made the alien officers uncomfortable. But I can tell you this. The Void Render Collective has conquered dozens of star systems by defeating enemies who fought the way they expected them to fight. They've never faced an enemy that specializes in being unpredictable. Admiral Zenth's mandibles clicked in rapid sequence. And you believe humans can be sufficiently unpredictable to break their collective consciousness? Admiral, 3 hours ago you thought my survival was statistically impossible. You called it luck and questioned my loyalty. Hana's voice carried quiet satisfaction. Now you're asking me to save the galaxy. She put her helmet back on the table with deliberate care. Call it luck again? I dare you. The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences in the briefing room. It wasn't the silence of suspicion or confusion. It was the silence of recognition. The 3 alien officers finally understood what they were dealing with. Humans weren't just another species in the Galactic Defense Alliance.